Hello and welcome back to the Variables, Constants and Arguments in Studio module. In this demo, we'll learn how to work with array-type variables in UiPath Studio. We'll create an array of strings, add values, modify them, and display the array. First, let's define what an array is. An array is a type of variable with a fixed size structure that can store multiple values of the same data type, such as numbers, strings, images, Boolean values, and so on. But what does fixed size really mean? The term fixed size refers to the fact that we can create arrays with a fixed number of elements, and the size can't be increased at runtime. There are many situations where arrays are useful for storing multiple values of the same type. For example, in an email sending scenario, if you need to use 100 different strings, it would be more efficient to store them in an array and then select the specific strings that you need for each email. Similarly, in a retail store, arrays can be used to track the inventory levels of multiple products instead of using a separate variable for each product. This can be done by creating an array of integers and assigning an index number to each product. The value of each element in the array represents the current number of that product in stock. Okay, now let's see arrays in action. Let's add a sequence, rename it arrays, and add an annotation. Next, we'll add an assign activity and define a new array type variable. How do we create an array type variable? Well, we're familiar with the methods of creating variables, right? One of the methods is to click New Variable from the Data Manager panel. Let's call it String Array. You can change the data type from here. Or let's open the Variables panel and change the type of our variable to an array of strings by choosing Array of Type. Click OK. The scope of our variable is the arrays sequence, and we don't have a default one. Great, let's add our string array in the To field of the Assign activity. As for the value, let's enter two strings, John Doe. Click OK again. Of course, let's rename our Assign activity to Assign, Define an Array, and use an annotation to describe it. To display it, we'll use a log message activity. Set the log level to info. To show the contents of our array of strings, we'll use a method called string concatenation. This involves combining each element of the array one by one with a space in between. Each element in an array has a unique index number which is used to reference it. The first element in the array has an index of 0. The second element has an index of 1, and so on. Now let's rename our newly added activity to log message concatenation of strings and add an annotation. Perfect. It's time to run the process and see what happens. By checking the output panel, we can see the elements of the array separated by a space. That's great. But how can we change the value of an element within an array? To illustrate this, let's modify the first element. We can change the value John to Jane as an example. For this, let's add another assign activity and use the To input field to access the element at index 0. Then let's enter Jane in the value field to modify the element. As with the previous activities, we'll rename it and add an annotation. Let's display our modified array by using a new info level log message activity. Now let's use the string.join method. The string.join method concatenates the elements of an array using a specified separator between each element. In this case, we're using a space as the separator. We need to rename the activity and add the annotation. Let's run the workflow a second time. In the output panel, we can notice that the first message displays the original array values, while the second message displays the modified array values. And that's it. In this video, we've covered the concepts of creating an array of strings, adding values to it, modifying it, and displaying it. To further solidify your understanding of the topic, try building a scenario on your own using the example of inventory levels for multiple products mentioned at the beginning of this video. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy automation!